Are you ready to graduate from the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot tradition? Do you have a thing for controversial white cis male magicians of the 18th century with far too large trust funds for their own good? Are you looking to totally trip out on some synthetic projective geometry, whatever the hell that is? If you've answered yes to any of those questions, you may be ready for the Thoth Deck. Hello, my loves. Today's tarot topic is the Thoth Deck, or Thoth Deck, or Tahuti, or Thoth. Different pronunciations. Academically, I have heard that it is supposed to be pronounced Tot, but I say Thoth because I do what I want. In this video, I'm going to go through a few points of information that you should know before jumping into this amazing, multi-dimensionally esoteric tarot deck. Now, these points are not to deter you. In fact, they are to inspire you and give you more information before jumping in. However, some of them are a soft warning to just let you know what you're getting into. Before I start, there are two things I want to address. First of all, this deck has no bad juju. Any superstition that you think it is connected to is your superstition. The deck is just super powerful images painted by Lady Frieda Harris on cardstock. Anything else is yours. Now, the second thing I have to address is the elephant in the room, which is Aleister Crowley. And I'm going to just say two quick things. First of all, you don't have to like the musician to like the music. Whatever judgments you have of him and his life and his choices, you cannot deny the gigantic impact that he had on tarot historically and on the occult world in general. I mean, I like to joke with my witch friends and say, Aleister Crowley wrote all your rituals, but that's besides the point. I'm not saying what views you should have, but respect that his work was influential. Number two, just read his work. If you're interested in the Thoth Deck, you're going to have to anyway. But if you really want to understand him, if you want to have a judgment on him, just read his work and see what you feel. It will either resonate or not. And if it doesn't resonate, it will only support your point of view. Okay, so let's get to it. First thing you should know about this deck is that if you're going to actually learn this deck and actually want to read with it and work with it, you are going to have to study. Now, Mary K. Greer and Benabel Wen are two of my favorite tarot pioneers of our time. Mary K. Greer just delivered a beautiful presentation in the World Divination Association virtual conference, which I also presented at, but her presentation was so good. And one of her main points was kind of deciphering and delineating the differences between what psychic work is and what intuition is. And her main point was that we are all intuitive, but psychic is not always the same thing. And another point she had, and she actually mentioned Benabel Wen's video in this, is that yes, tarot is intuitive, but it should not only be intuitive. Like, you have to study, you have to work. And I mean, you don't have to, but Benabel Wen explains it more in detail in her video, which I will link below. In my opinion, yes, it's intuitive, but if you're only intuitive, you are limiting yourself so much. When you study the esoteric underpinnings of something like tarot, which is such a rich symbolic system, which you can use to interface with the universe and your own consciousness, that will give your intuition more rooms in your castle, so to speak, to exist and explore and shapeshift. It will give you more of a symbolic vocabulary and more of a range of psychic motion, is what I want to say, is how I want to describe it. That's kind of cool. Range of psychic motion. I'm a personal trainer, so range of motion just made sense to me. So yeah, study equals more range of psychic motion. More range of psychic motion equals more detail, more depth, and more information for your client. So in this deck specifically, you will have to study a lot because of what it's made up of. To kind of distill the ingredients of this deck for you in a very simplified manner, I would say it includes Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism, but through the lens of the Golden Dawn, astrology, Thelema, which is Crowley's religion, but Thelema's not as important as the other two. And lastly, certain elements of alchemy and certain elements of magic and Crowley's philosophy. But the main things that you're going to be working with are the Kabbalah and the astrology. Wald Amberstone, who is another tarot pioneer that I deeply respect and admire, has described Kabbalah to me in the tarot as kind of like the university training or the college level training of tarot. Do you need it to succeed and have a good life? Absolutely not. Will it help? Probably. And it will give you a lot of information and a lot of stuff to work with. So if you couldn't tell, I'm a pretty big Kabbalah fan because of how much it changed my life. Not necessary, but will add so many dimensions to your readings and to your understanding of this system. There's actually a quick way to find out if you would enjoy studying this type of deck, and it is through this question. How much do you enjoy the fact that tarot is divided into 4 suits to represent 4 elements with 4 distinct meanings? If you find yourself very drawn to that paradigm, that is the exact same part of the brain that you'll be using to divide the deck further when you're working with the Thoth deck. Same idea, different associations, different correspondences, different planes of consciousness, different real estates of meaning in the mundane world. Same stuff, it's just more complicated and it just divides it further. So studying is important. Well, what do you study? I'm glad you asked, even though I asked. All right, let's get to it. What do you study? Well, I'm going to recommend first the source material, which is the Book of Thoth by Aleister Crowley. Now, a lot of people don't like this book. A lot of people love this book. The reason why a lot of people don't like this book is they get turned off when they start reading it because it may feel a little impenetrable at times. That is because Crowley has a very ranting and dense writing style. He references a lot of his other works. He references a lot of literary works. He makes a lot of esoteric references. On top of that, his vocabulary is extremely colorful, to say the least. It's witty, but it's also brilliant. It's a lot. It's a very, very dense book. And of course it is, because this is a very, very dense, jam-packed deck. Luckily, there's a supplement book that I'm going to get to in a second. But I would always recommend someone that's working with the Thoth to read this more than once. I had to read it at least twice before I started to understand it, and I was my 3rd time reading it that I was really deeply inspired. I mean, you're going to be inspired the first time you read it too, but by read 3 I was like, wow, everything's connecting, everything's making sense. And I still try to read it at least once a year to refresh, because and I didn't mention this, but the Thoth deck is a lifelong study. There's a lot of stuff in here. So supplement book is the Understanding the Thoth Tarot by Lon-Milo Duquette. Or Duquet, I forget. Lon-Milo Duquette is so funny, so goofy, and so smart, so wise. He takes all of the complex cosmic information from this book and explains it in a more simple and fun way that is kind of a page-turner. It's really deep and fun. I did get to meet him once, and it was so much fun. I'm a big fan of his. He has a very interesting life. So I highly recommend this book. Maybe read this book first, because then you'll get kind of the structure of the deck, what everything's about, and then read this book. I think that would be the best order of business. Okay, point number 2. This deck accelerates karma. So when I first started at my dream job, which was at Earth Spirit New Age Center in Red Bank, New Jersey, which I've always wanted to work at since I was 10 years old. When I started that job, my boss, the owner of the store, told me, oh, you use the Thoth deck, because he also uses that deck. And I had asked him why he doesn't use it for psychic fairs, which are when you're reading for shorter amounts of time. And he said, well, it accelerates people's karma. And it made sense to me, but I didn't know why at the time. But it just rang true. And as I've been studying the deck and using it for people, I kind of begin to see why. And it's because what the deck does in a reading is it doesn't just give you a divination or a divinatory information. It actually shows you the underlying energy of what like the backstage of reality, what's happening behind the scenes energetically that are causing um, the future and the present and your ideas of the past, all of that. And when you're working with those energies, that's part of karma. Because if you think about it, we're like layers, right? The way I view karma is like we have all these different layers, and those layers, as they drape over certain shapes, they take the form of those shapes. So let's say your karma is a triangle. If you drape something over a triangle, you're still going to see those points. And those points of the triangle are going to still be visible layer after layer, even if it's very subtle. So what the Thoth deck does is it actually shows you the triangle, whereas some other tarot decks and other divination systems might just show you some of the surface layers. I'm not saying other divination systems are superficial. I'm just saying that this one specifically digs deep to that initial form that's causing the outside forms. So when you do that, you start to change that form, and it changes your karma, it changes your patterns. It also is a deck that just really tells it like it is. Do I think it's predisposed to shadow work? Maybe, but more so because it's predisposed to reality, which is much more, is what a lot of people would consider shadow work. So depends on what you consider shadow work. Point number 3. The deck is not linear, it is kind of three-dimensional. What do I mean by that? Well, remember when you first started learning tarot, you probably started with an intro book. And that intro book probably taught you the cards linearly, starting with the Fool, going to the Magician, then the High Priestess, and ending maybe with the Ten of Pentacles or maybe the Page of Pentacles, whatever the last card they consider to be. Well, that's a little bit how you're going to learn the Thoth deck too. However, the Thoth deck is like cheese, because there are holes in every card that lead to other cards. There are doorways. It's like every card is a room with multiple doors to pretty much every other card in the same deck when you really break it down. T. Susan Chang, who is a brilliant tarot reader, author, student, and teacher of the occult, I've seen some of her maps that I think she uses in presentation, where she actually links kind of almost like each card to every other card in different ways. And that's really what this deck is about. Now, I'm not saying the other traditions don't do that. Rider-Waite-Smith tradition can do that as well, but this deck does it a little bit more explicitly. And I think this deck is more meant to think of the tarot deck as a holistic, ever-present, always existing set of 78 ideas that constantly run into each other. Okay, point number 4, larger real estate of meaning. So one of the things that drew me to this deck was the fact that it's almost more abstract. It is more abstract than the Rider-Waite-Smith. Whereas the Rider-Waite-Smith Two of Cups shows two people, they're looking at each other, there's a romantic energy there's a lion in between them, there's obviously some passion. The Thoth Two of Cups is just 2 cups and 2 fish in the sea. And it actually gets more abstract. That's one of the more literal cards. As you go down the cups, you can see it's just more abstract. There's almost less of an illustration, more of an abstract art piece. And that is because this deck works on the cosmic scale and is more about the energies, like I said earlier, behind the matter than the appearance of the matter or the question itself. So when you're working with Two of Cups, it's not just that relationship. Two of Cups is love itself. And the deck explains this because as the 2, it's connected to the idea of will, and as cups, it's connected to emotions, and the heart. So what is the will of the heart? Which is love. Like love, period, itself is in the Two of Cups. That's a lot. So in divination, it's like, what do you do with that? Well, that's where your intuition comes in and your technique and method comes in. But because each card has such a larger area of meaning, you actually are forced to use your intuition more. And so this deck ends up accelerating your intuitive abilities, as well as enlarging your organization of symbols. I would describe the difference between the Rider-Waite-Smith system and the Thoth system as the Rider-Waite-Smith system is almost like providing illustrative examples of how the energy of the cards in the Thoth system can manifest. Again, I'm not trying to belittle the Rider-Waite-Smith. I love the Rider-Waite-Smith system, but because it's more specific, because it paints a specific scene, the symbolism can sometimes be a little bit more clunky and a little bit more limited, whereas this deck is kind of much more open-ended. Now, that's not always a pro. Sometimes that can be a con. For example, if I'm reading for a client and I pull out the Eight of Cups, and the Eight of Cups is indolence, well, what do you work with that? Oh, it looks like you're going to be lazy for the next month. Indolence. See, it's a give and take. Obviously, this card covers a lot more than indolence itself, but from a surface layer reading, it seems like it gives less information than the classic image in the Rider-Waite-Smith tradition of somebody walking away from a project, a stack of cups that he or she didn't finish. That says more immediately. However, with study, meditation, contemplation, you'll actually see how this Eight of Cups kind of expands more meaning. And that's where we get into the Kabbalistic stuff, the numerology, the elements, and all of that. Point number 5. If the tarot is a gateway drug into the occult, the Thoth deck is a jetpack drug into the multiverse. Okay, this is more of my opinion than anything, but when you're studying the Thoth deck, you are really digging into Kabbalah, astrology, Thelema, and other things, and creating relationships between all of that. So not only that, but you're doing that all through the lens of Aleister Crowley. It's a wild ride. So I find that if you are someone that is prone to philosophical debate, philosophical interest, if you like to destroy your philosophical paradigm, if you're like me and you're a philosophical paradigm masochist, where you just love to shatter your view and an idea of reality for something new, this is a great deck to work with. It will definitely do that. Point number 6, the Thoth deck has an agenda. Not to scare you, but to excite you. This deck does have kind of a point of view when it reads, and that is because it is intended to do certain things. Aleister Crowley has a certain philosophy that is embedded in his religion, in his magical practice, and though you don't have to be a fan of Crowley or his philosophy to successfully use the deck, you absolutely don't have to. It does come out in certain ways, but in a good way, and I'm going to explain it. With his famous line, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." And also his other famous line, "Love is the law, love under will." And that pretty much encapsulates the philosophy of Thelema. Now, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. It does not mean do what you want. It means do your higher will. And the whole purpose of his magical practice is attaining what's called knowledge and conversation with your holy guardian angel, which is a cool way to say knowing your higher self, knowing your true potential. And knowing your true potential is not always fun and is not always what you expect, and sometimes can be really difficult and really groundbreaking. Doing your true will is when you are connected to that higher self, that holy guardian angel. So this deck will help you connect to your true will. Most of the time in my readings with clients, it manifests as helping them with career stuff and certain relationship things. So it will straight up tell you, is this person right for you right now? Is this person serving you in the relationship? It will tell you, is this career path right for you? Is this job good for you? What are you gaining from it? What are you sacrificing for it? What more can you be doing? It will help you get to your true will, whether you want to or not. So that concludes my ideas on what to know before studying the Thoth deck. These are just my experiences and the experiences of other Thoth readers that I've talked with and worked with. I have nothing against other systems. I use the Rider-Waite-Smith all the time. I use Lenormand all the time. I just find that for me, the Thoth deck has a certain level of strengths in a certain area, and also a certain level of weaknesses. I'll probably make another video on that. One last thing I want to say is that I did make a video about synesthesia in tarot, about how we use numbers and ideas to kind of dig into our intuition. I would recommend looking at that video because that is one way that I really started to understand this deck and connect with it. And it's because of that synesthesic ability that we all have. It's that really got me to be a proficient Thoth reader with clients. Now, you don't have to read the Thoth with clients. It can totally just be a path to self-discovery, which is actually some of the deepest work with it. So let me know your thoughts. Oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Are you a Thoth reader? What are your experiences? What are your opinions about it? I'd love to talk. Thank you so much for watching my video, and let's continue our journey through consciousness together.